Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Inshallah, today we will continue discussing the topics in research methodology. And our topic today is a qualitative research. There are two types of research, basically, qualitative research and quantitative research. And then there is another type, it's called a mixed research method, where the researchers combine the qualitative and the quantitative methods. So today we will discuss the nature of qualitative research. There are many types of qualitative research. There are many approaches to qualitative research. And the approaches to qualitative research tend to be flexible and focus on retaining rich meaning when interpreting data. So the advantages of qualitative research is that the researchers are not confined or limited to uh, to the to the questionnaire. The information is rich. For example, if the researcher use interview methods, the researcher can ask open questions and can get many information. So the data is rich, and there are flexible ways of interpreting data. Unlike the quantitative research, where the researchers have to do the analysis based on mathematics or based on statistics. So in the qualitative research, the method of interpreting data is flexible, and the data is quite rich. So there are many approaches there are many approaches to the qualitative research, and the common approaches include grounded theory, ethnography, action research, case study, phenomenology, and narrative research. So let's discuss grounded theory, or GT. Grounded theory is a research method concerned with the generation of theory. So in the grounded theory, the researchers um, gather the data and information, and from the data, the researchers try to develop theory. So grounded theory is a research method concerned with the generation or the development of theory, which is grounded in data that has been collected and analyzed. So based on the data that has been collected and analyzed, this type of approach will try to generate or come up with a theory. So the grounded theory is used to uncover things like social relationships and behaviors of groups that is that is known as social processes. Grounded theory is mostly described as grounded theory is mostly described as a research method in which the theory is developed from the data. So grounded theory is a research method in which the theory is developed from the data rather than the other way around. Like uh, in the quantitative method, we develop the theory first, then the researchers collect and analyze the data to examine whether the data support or does not support the theory. So in grounded theory, it's the other way around, where the researchers gather the data first, analyze the data, and then from the data, the researcher developed a theory. So this as an inductive approach. Inductive approach means that um, it uh, it starts with zero theory, uh, collect the data, analyze the data, and from the data, the researchers develop a theory. So that is called the inductive approach. Grounded theory refers to a set of systematic inductive methods. Okay, inductive methods means start from the data. From the data, we come up with the theory. So grounded theory refers to a set of systematic inductive methods for conducting qualitative research which are aimed toward theory development. So the aim of grounded theory is to develop a theory uh, based on the data. Researchers use the term grounded theory So researchers use the term grounded theory to mean the methods of inquiry or the methods of study for collecting and in particular analyzing data. So grounded theory means the methods of research for collecting and analyzing data, and from the data the researchers come up with a theory. Grounded theory commonly uses the following data collection methods. Interviewing participants with open-ended questions. So this is one of the methods where the researchers interview respondents using open-ended questions. So it is flexible. The researchers can ask questions um, that follows the response by the respondents. So, for example, if a researcher asks the respondent, uh, for example, do you pay income zakat, right? And then the respondent will answer. Then the next question is, okay, what are the factors or the motivations that you pay income zakat? So the respondents will give the response, and from that response, the researcher will continue asking questions. So that is called the open-ended questions. And then the second method is participant observation or fieldwork, where the researchers uh, uh, observe certain phenomena and participate in the in the phenomena. So the researchers participate while trying to collect the data. Okay. For example, a researcher wants to study the behavior of factory workers, right? Or the behavior of female factory workers, for example. So in that case, the researcher will participate, means the researcher herself would become the factory worker without uh, without the knowledge of the other participants in the study. The other participants who are the female factory workers have no knowledge about the researcher uh, who works or pretend to work as the female factory worker in order to ensure that the behavior of the participants are not biased. If the participants know that the researcher uh, will want to study their behavior, so they will act and they will behave um, in a manner that is biased. And then the third method is a study of artifacts and text. So, for example, the researcher could use old documents, archive, uh, and text. So that is called artifacts and text. Okay, the second type of qualitative research is called ethnography. Ethnography is the study of people in their own environment through the use of methods such as participant observation and face-to-face interviewing. Classic ethnographic research involves a detailed description of the whole culture of the whole of a culture outside of the country of origin of the researcher. For example, suppose there is so for example a researcher from Japan uh, came to Kedah to study the impact of Islamic education on their social behavior, on the behavior of individuals and on the society. Whether the Islamic education uh, improves and makes the person makes the respondents as good people or otherwise. So the researcher is not from Malaysia. She came from Japan, and she observed, right? She observed and she participated. And then she did the face-to-face interviews. So she was not a Muslim at first, So she came to Kedah and lived among the Muslims. During Ramadan, she was fasting, just like Muslims. And then during Salat, she sat at the back of the musalla or masjid, and she was wearing hijab. So she did exactly like the other participants, and she did the face-to-face interviews. Right. So that is called the ethnography, the study of the people in their own environment through the use of methods such as participant observation and face-to-face interviews. The third type of qualitative research is called action research. Action research is an interactive inquiry process that balances problem-solving actions implemented in a collaborative context with data-driven collaborative analysis or research to understand underlying causes, enabling future predictions about personal and organizational change. So in the action research, the researchers collaborate with people from the society, with people from outside of academics, such as people from industry, in order to um, solve certain problems, in order to come up with solutions um, based on the data to 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 come up with certain solutions. So action research is an interactive inquiry. So this type of research is interactive in the sense that it involves the researcher, the community, and people outside of the academic areas. So that balances problem solving actions. So in action research is not too academic. It is a balance between academic protocols and also opinions from people outside of the academic, people from the society, people from the organizations, and of course use the collaborative effort uses the data that is obtained uh, collaboratively. Some of the data is obtained by the researcher, and also some of them are obtained uh, through the interaction with the people, uh, with the people at stake, with the stakeholders, the people who are interested in the research. So action research is an interactive inquiry process that balances problem-solving actions implemented in a collaborative context with data-driven collaborative analysis or research to understand underlying causes. For example, why why students' performance in certain exams um, has deteriorated, while students did not perform very well, for example. So in this type of uh, action research, the teachers, okay, together with maybe parents, together with some people from the society, right? They try to collaborate, they try to find the data, and they try to come up uh, with the findings of why the performance has gotten worse, and they try to find the right solutions. So action research creates knowledge based on inquiries conducted within specific and often practical contexts. The purpose of action research is to learn through action. Okay, for example, okay, the student's performance was bad, and what the school, for example, and the parents, for example, can do collaboratively to improve the performance of the students. For example, they take certain actions like having, for example, extra classes, tuition classes, or giving them extra work. And from that action, they try to find out whether the action uh, can uh, can solve the problem or can can amend the problem so that in the future the performance of the students will improve. So the study try to come up with action and examine whether the action can solve the problem or not, and what's the effect of the action on the or towards the problem solving. So the purpose of action research is to learn through action that then leads on to personal or professional development. Next approach is called case study. Case study is a research approach that is used to generate an in-depth, multifaceted understanding of a complex issue in its real-life context. So case study is an established research design that is used extensively in a wide variety of disciplines, particularly in social sciences. Case studies are also popular in business area. Case studies aim to analyze specific issues within the boundaries of a specific environment, situation, or organization. For example, an investigation into the reasons of the global financial and economic crisis of 2008 to 2010. That is an example of the topic for case study. So in this topic, it tries to investigate what are the reasons that contribute to the financial and economic crisis, specifically during the financial crisis of 2008 to 2010. Next approach in qualitative research is phenomenology. Phenomenology is a form of qualitative research that focuses on the study of an individual experiences within the world. So, for example, you want to study a person's um, experience, right? For example, his experience um, in the World War II, for example, or the researcher wants to study, for example, the experience of a person, okay, studying uh, religion in Mecca, right, until he became Islamic scholar. So any types of experience of an individual. So it is called phenomenology. So it is a powerful approach for research. However, the nature of this phenomenology is often intimidating to researchers because of the challenges and because of the time consuming challenges. Means sometimes the person is not accessible. Sometimes is a challenge to make appointment with the person and to follow uh, the person's um, uh, so it's quite challenging and oftentimes is time consuming. So phenomenology can be intimidating to some researchers. The purpose of the phenomenological approach is to illuminate uh, means to brighten the specific to identify phenomena through how the phenomena is perceived by the individuals or by the what we call the respondents, by the individuals. So the purpose of the phenomenology is to brighten, to give more light, to understand more about the specific, is uh, to get more understanding about something which is specific. So specific to the person, specific to his or her experience, and to identify phenomena through how they are perceived. For example, uh, to identify the phenomena of World War One, oh, sorry, World War Two, for example, as it was experienced by the individual and how the individual perceived World War Two, just for example. So the purpose of the phenomenology is to get more understanding about something which is specific, to identify certain phenomena or certain phenomena or occurrences, something that happened in the past, through how the occurrences are perceived by the individuals in that situation, in a particular situation. Next is ethnography. We talked about ethnography already. Okay. Next one is narrative research. Narrative research is a term that subsumes a group of approaches that rely on the written or spoken words or visual representation of individuals. These approaches typically focus on the lives of individuals as told through their own stories. So that is called narrative, where the researchers are interested to know the experiences of an individuals uh, as the individuals tells their stories, and the researchers just narrate. Narrate means just uh, tell the stories and it is as the stories was told by the individuals. Okay, so in writing the in doing the qualitative research, um, some people ask whether theory is used in the qualitative research. Is a theory used in qualitative research? So let's discuss the use of theory in qualitative research. Qualitative researchers actually use theory. Qualitative researchers also use theory in their studies in several ways. First, much like in the quantitative research, the theory uh, the theory is used as a broad explanation for certain behavior and attitudes. And the theory may be and the theory may be complete with variables, constructs, and hypotheses. For example, ethnographers employ cultural themes about culture, or aspects of culture to study in their qualitative project, such as social control, language, stability and change, or social organization, such as a kinship or families. So in this case, the theme uh, provide a ready-made series of hypotheses. So based on the themes derived from the theory, the hypotheses are ready-made to be tested from the literature. So in qualitative research, researchers might not refer to them as theories because they provide broad explanations, just broad and general explanations that anthropologists use to study the culture, sharing, behavior, and attitudes of people. So this approach is popular in qualitative health science research, in which the researchers begin with a theoretical model, such as the adoption of health practices or a quality of life theoretical orientation. So if it is, so it's not really accurate if people say that theory is not used in qualitative research. Okay, so in qualitative research, also researchers use theory, although some of them might not refer to them as theory. So second, qualitative researchers increasingly use a theoretical lens or theoretical perspective in qualitative research, which provides an overall perspective for the study of questions of, for example, gender, class, and race or other issues of marginalized groups. This lens or perspective becomes a transformative perspective that shapes the type of questions asked by the researcher and informs how data are collected and analyzed, and also provides a call for change or for certain actions that needs to be done in the future. So in the 1980s, qualitative research underwent a transformation to broaden its scope of inquiry to include these theoretical lenses or perspectives. They guide these theoretical perspectives guide the researchers as to what issues are important to examine and the people who need to be studied. So the qualitative researchers also use some type of theoretical perspective or theoretical lens. So it's not accurate if we say that qualitative researchers don't use any theory in their research. So the theoretical perspectives the theoretical perspectives also indicate how the researcher positions himself or herself in qualitative research, for example, upfront or biased from personal, cultural, and historical context, and how the final return accounts need to be written, for example, without further marginalizing individuals by collaborating with respondents. And recommendations for changes to improve lives and society. So, for example, in critical ethnography studies, for example, researchers begin with a theory that informs their studies. So this causal theory might be one of the okay. So in qualitative research, for example, in ethnographic studies, researchers start their research with a theory that informs their studies. Okay, so we finished discussing the qualitative research.
Yeah.
Ahmad, any question on qualitative research?
No, no, so far, sir. Thank you.
So we move to the nature of quantitative research.
Okay.
So most of the students, they prefer to use quantitative research
Okay.
for some reasons. One of the reasons is they they observe that the seniors use
Okay.
quantitative research, or the previous students they did their study using quantitative research.
Yeah.
So they are afraid to do the qualitative research.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's discuss quantitative research. Quantitative research is an approach for testing theories by examining the relationship among variables. So when we do quantitative research, we try to examine the relationship among the variables that we choose in our study. These variables in turn can be measured. The variables must be measured typically using instruments such as questionnaires, so that number data can be analyzed, so that the data can be analyzed using some kind of statistical procedures, multiple regression analysis, univariate analysis, um, partial least squares, uh, and other statistical procedures. The final written report has a set structure consisting of a chapter on introduction, literature and theory, methods, results, and discussion. Like qualitative researchers, those who engage in quantitative research so like qualitative researchers, those who engage in quantitative research have assumptions about testing theories deductively.
Said also analyze, need to edit.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
So quantitative researchers have assumptions about testing theories. Deductively means that the researchers have theory first, or what we call the theoretical framework of the study. So the researchers first try to develop theories or theoretical framework of the studies, building in protections against bias, controlling for alternative explanations, and being able to generalize uh, and replicate the findings in the future. So in quantitative research is characterized by deductive approaches. Deductive approaches means uh, start with theory, then collect and analyze the data, and then test whether the data support or do not support the theory. So quantitative research is characterized by deductive approaches to the research process, which aimed at proving. Proving means to check whether the data support or does not support the theory. Disproving means, uh, uh, proving means to test whether the data support the theory. Disproving means to examine whether the data does not support the theory, or lending credence to existing theories. Or quantitative theories also try to support the existing theories. So the quantitative research involves measuring variables and testing relationships between variables in order to okay. So quantitative research involves measuring variables. We have independent variables, dependent variables. Some researchers have mediating variable, and some they add moderating variable. So quantitative research involves measuring variables and testing relationships between variables in order to reveal patterns, correlations, or causal relationships. Researchers may employ linear methods of data collection and analysis that result in statistical data. The values underlying quantitative research includes neutrality. So that is the value that must be observed. There's no bias and objectivity, and the acquisition of a sizable scope of knowledge. For example, a statistical overview from a large sample. So the sample collected must fulfill certain criteria of the must fulfill the criteria of selection of sample. So this one we will talk about in more detail. The the selection criteria in order to avoid the biased selection. So this quantitative approach is generally appropriate when your primary purpose is to explain or to evaluate. Use of theory in quantitative methods. So some people ask how theory is used in doing the quantitative methods. Uh, so before we discuss quantitative theories, it's important to understand variables and the types of variables that are used in doing the quantitative research. What's the meaning of variable? A variable refers to a characteristic or attribute of an individual or an organization that can be measured or observed and that varies among the people or organization being studied. This variance means that scores in a given situation fall into at least two mutually exclusive categories. Psychologists prefer to use the term construct rather than variable. So construct carries the connotation more of an abstract idea than a specifically defined term. However, social scientists typically use the term variable in the discussion. Variables often measured in studies include gender, age, socioeconomic status, attitudes or behaviors such as racism, social control, and others. Variables are distinguished by two characteristics. One is called temporal order and measurement. So temporal order means that one variable precedes another in time. So one variable occurs before other variables. Because of this time ordering, it is said that one variable affects or causes another variable. Though in a more accurate statement would be that one variable probably causes another variable. When dealing with studies in the natural setting and with humans, researchers cannot absolutely prove cause and effect, according to Rosenthal and Rosnow, 1991. And social scientists now say that there is probable causation. Temporal order means that quantitative researchers think about variables in order from left to right. Means the left variable probably caused the right variable. And the researchers order the variables in purpose statements. Okay, in stating the purpose statements or the objectives, research questions, they mention about the variables. One variable probably causes the other variable. And visual models into left to right, cause and effect type presentation. Okay, now let's discuss independent variable. What is the meaning of independent variables? Independent variables are those that probably cause, influence, or affect outcomes. Independent variables are also called treatment variables, manipulated variables, antecedent, or predictor variables. Dependent variable, dependent variables are those that depend on independent variables. So independent variables probably cause or influence the dependent variables. So dependent variables are those that depend on the independent variables. So dependent variable are the outcomes. So the dependent variables are the outcomes or results of the influence of the independent variables. Other names for dependent variables are criterion variables, outcome variables, effect variables, and response variables. Okay, the third variable is called mediating variables, or some people call intervening variables. Intervening or mediating variables stand between the independent and dependent variables, and they mediate the effects of the independent variable on the dependent variable. The mediating variable, the organization of study, stands between so the mediating variable stands between the independent and dependent variables in the probable cause link. Usually we mention in the theoretical framework of the study. The next variable is called moderating variables. Moderating variables are independent variables that affect the direction and or the strength of the relationship between independent and dependent variables, according to Thomson 2006. So moderating variables have an influence that probably uh, affect the strength of the relationship, whether it make the relationship stronger or weaker. And also it affects the direction, um, whether there is a positive, whether the uh, and it also affects the direction from the independent variable to the dependent variable. So these moderating variables are new variables constructed by a researcher by taking one variable and multiplying the variable by another to determine the joint impact of both the dependent variable. Okay, the other type of variables are controlled variables and confounding variables. Control variables play an active role in quantitative studies. These are a special type of independent variable that researchers measure because they potentially influence the dependent variable. So researchers use statistical procedures such as analysis of covariance or ANCOVA to control for these variables. So the control variables or the confounding variables may be demographic, the location of the respondents, or personal variables, for example, age of respondents or gender, that need to be controlled so that the true influence of the independent variable on the dependent variable can be determined. Another type of variable is called spurious or a confounding or spurious variable. It's not actually measured or observed in a study, but it sometimes exists. The spurious variable sometimes exists, uh, and its influence cannot be directly detected. Researchers comment on the influence of confounding or spurious variables after the study has been completed, because these variables that have been studied may have operated to explain the relationship between the independent variable and dependent variable, but they were not or could not be easily assessed. That is, a confounding variable such as, for example, discriminatory attitudes. So these are not measured, but however, uh, after the study is done, some researchers could find some variables which are called spurious. So in a quantitative research studies, variables are related to answer research question or to achieve research objective, or to make predictions about what the researcher expects the results to show. So these predictions are called hypotheses. So let's continue the use of a theory in quantitative research. In quantitative research, some historical precedent exists for viewing a theory as a scientific prediction or explanation for what the researcher expects to find. According to Thomas. According to Kerlinger's 1979, a theory is a set of interrelated constructs of variables, definitions, and propositions that presents a systematic view of phenomena by specifying relations among variables with the purpose of explaining natural phenomena. So in this definition, a theory in quantitative research is an interrelated set of constructs or variables formed into propositions or hypotheses that specify the relationship among variables in terms of magnitude, how big or how small, or direction, positive or negative influence. A theory might appear in a research study as an argument, a discussion, a figure, or a rationale. And sometimes, the researchers explain it in figure, and they call it theoretical framework of the study. And this theory, it helps to explain or predict uh, what's going on, the phenomena that occurs. So investigators or researchers,
So what does it mean, the first word? Opposite?
which one?
The first word.
Oh,
Lower, labo, I don't know.
oh, this one.
Yeah.
This is a person.
The
Uh,
person. That was it.
yeah,
Okay, okay.
Leibowitz and Hagedorn, in 1971.
It just means it's two names.
Yeah, two names.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, this is a discussion a long time ago.
Yeah, yeah, yes.
So they,
It's 1971.
yeah, 1971.
Yeah.
So they say that it has to be a theoretical rational.
Yes.
The idea of a theoretical rational means um, they specify how and why variables and relational statements are interrelated. For example, attitude influence compliance behavior. Okay, so how attitude influence compliance behavior,
Yes.
and why attitude influence compliance behavior. So according to Leibowitz and Hagedorn, um, so it has to be some rationale to the relationship, how and why uh, one variable influence or probably cause the other variable. Why would an independent variable, for example, X, influence or affect a dependent variable Y? So why one variable influence the other variable? So uh, because the theory, with the theory, so the theory would be able to provide an explanation for why one variable influence the other variable. So that's why in quantitative research, when we write, when we draw the theoretical framework of the study, we need to justify why the independent variable is included in the theoretical framework. Why the researcher thinks that uh, in an independent variable, for example, X, influence the dependent variable. Okay, so a discussion about the theory would appear in a section of proposal in literature review or in a separate section called the theory base or the theoretical rationale or the theoretical perspective. Usually we call the theoretical framework of the study. We draw the constructs or the variables, and we try to justify how and why the independent variables influence the dependent variables, and how the mediating variables is influenced by the independent variables, and how the mediating variable influence the dependent variable. So it must be based on the theory. So researchers combine independent, mediating, and dependent variables into questions based on different forms of measures. These questions provide information about the type of relationship, whether the relationship is positive or negative or unknown, and its magnitude, whether there is a high relationship or low relationship. So forming this information into a predictive statement or hypothesis, a researcher, for example, might write, the greater the centralization of power in leaders, the greater the disenfranchisement of the followers, or any other hypothesis. For another example, the higher the religiosity of Muslims, the more likely they will pay income zakat. So that is called the hypothesis. Okay, I want to change this one. Okay.
Yeah, sure. So,
So for example, the higher the religiosity of the Muslims, the more likely they will pay income zakat, or any other example. So theory develops as an explanation to advance knowledge in particular fields. Another aspect of theories is that the theories vary. The vary means they are different in their breadth of coverage. According to Newman, 2009, they reviewed theories at three levels: micro level, meso level, and macro level. Micro level theories provide explanations limited to small slices of time, space, or small number of people, such as Goffman's theory of phase work, which explains how people engage in rituals during face-to-face interactions. Meso-level theories link the micro and macro levels. These are theories of organizations, social movements, or communities, such as Collins' theory of control in organizations. Macro, macro-level theories explain larger aggregates, such as social institutions, cultural systems, and whole societies. Lansky's macro-level theory of social stratification, for example, explains how the amount of surplus in society increases with the development of society. Okay, chapter 7 is about the questionnaire. Okay, let's discuss questionnaire. Okay, so questionnaire, what is a questionnaire? Questionnaire is a set of questions on a topic or group of topics designed to be answered by the respondents. Questionnaire is the vehicle used to pose the questions that the researcher wants respondents to answer. Advantages of the questionnaire: it requires less skill, less training is needed, cheaper in nature. Nowadays, you can use e-surveys where the questionnaire is sent to email or some other forms of online. So now it's cheaper. Also, impersonal in nature um, means that it is more objective and there is less pressure. Anonymity means the respondents doesn't know the researcher if it is using e-surveys, and there is some kind of confidentiality where the information or the data from the questionnaire remains confidential, where other people do not know who the respondents are, what are their names, for example. It remains anonymous. And a questionnaire is suitable for geographically scattered population. However, there is a disadvantage uh, of the questionnaires. Number one, no control over respondents' environment. The researchers have no control over the respondents' environment, and response is also less. The response rate sometimes is low. No help on doubts. So if the respondents have doubts or misunderstanding, then there's no help. And then occurrences of errors. Some respondents might fill the questionnaire and make some human error. Some people say questionnaire is less reliable because it involves some kind of problem such as response bias. Response bias means respondents fill out the questionnaire in a manner that makes him or her feel good. Sometimes answers obtained can be wrong and not suitable for illiterates. So if people cannot read, they cannot answer the questionnaire. Typology of questionnaire. So there are two types of questionnaire, open-ended and closed-ended. Open-ended means the respondents are open to give any response. Closed-ended means the respondents um, have to answer in a certain way. There are two types of closed-ended, simple dichotomy and multiple choice. Two types of multiple choice, determinant choice and checklist choice. So let's discuss open-ended or unstructured questionnaire in which the respondent answers in his own words. So that is called open-ended. For example, what according to you is the biggest challenge of academic libraries? So the respondents can give any answers in his or her own words. Closed-ended or structured questionnaires, question in which respondent selects one or more options from a predetermined set of responses. So simple dichotomy, closed-ended question with only two responses. For example, how do you rate the service of library? Only two response, good or bad. So that is called simple dichotomy, closed-ended question. And multiple choice closed-ended questions with more than two response alternatives. For example, how much satisfaction do you get from your job? A great deal, B, quite a bit, C, a little bit, D, not at all. And then the determinant choice, multiple choice question in which respondent must select only one of the response alternatives. For example, how much satisfaction do you get from your library job? A, great deal, B, very little, C, fairly well, D, not at all. And then checklist question, multiple choice questions in which respondent can select more than one of the response alternatives. For example, please indicate the purpose of visit in the library. You may take as many responses as are applicable. Open-ended question, advantages of freedom and spontaneity of the answers. So the respondents have the freedom and they can answer in spontaneous, they can answer spontaneously, and there is opportunity to ask more questions, and it is useful for testing hypotheses about ideas. Disadvantages of open-ended questions, time-consuming, coding is very costly and slow to process because the information or the data are in words, and it demands more effort from the respondents. For closed-ended questions, most of the students they use the closed-ended questions. The advantages is there is no extended writing. Okay, the respondents don't have to write anything. They just tick their answer. They just tick the answer, and easy to process, useful for testing specific hypotheses. Disadvantages of closed-ended questions, loss of spontaneous response. The respondents cannot give a spontaneous response. Bias in some answer categories and may irritate respondents. Question format, general format. In possible answers, general format, all possible answers are listed and respondents are required to check or tick the appropriate answer. The respondents can tick, mark, color the box, or circle the number. Cafeteria style questions. This is another general format common style wherein the respondent is requested to check or indicate one item that describes his situation or as many items as applicable to his situation. Likert type response format. This is very popular among students. One of the most used format where a respondent is asked to make a judgment. They just tick in terms of an ordered set of categories. For example, number one, um, uh, strongly disagree. Number two, disagree. Number three, for example, undecided. Number four, strongly agree. Number five, strongly. Number four, agree. Number five, strongly agree. That's an example of a Likert type response format. Other format, okay, this is other format. The types of question, factual questions, question about facts, and then questions about opinion or attitude, questions about information, questions on self-perception, question on projective means what is expected to occur, questions about direction, and questions on intensity. Questionnaire layout. So when you write questionnaire, make sure that questions are without bias. Make the questions as simple as possible. Make the questions very specific. Avoid jargon. Jargon means big words that people don't understand. And also avoid shorthand. So all must be written in a complete sentence. Steer clear of sophisticated or uncommon words. Okay, don't use uh, avoid sophisticated or uncommon words, words that are not commonly used. Avoid ambiguous words. Avoid questions with a negative in them. Avoid hypothetical questions. Do not use words which could be misheard. Avoid double negatives. Avoid using acronyms or abbreviations. Add note of thanks at the end. Avoid double barred questions and avoid threatening questions. Questionnaire terms, attitude questions, questions that ask respondents about their dislikes, about their likes, what they don't like, about their preference, evaluation of objects, how they think or how they value the objects or persons or organizations, events or situations. That is attitude questions. Behavior questions, essentially factual and relate to what respondents did in the past or what respondents are currently doing or may do in the future. Classification questions usually factual and relate to demographic characteristics. Pre-coding, numbering all response categories on a questionnaire so all responses receive a number as they are given. Routing, guiding the respondents or interviewer in a questionnaire to the next relevant question depending on the answer given. Questionnaire pre-testing or pilot study. So some students are required, especially at PhD level, they are required to do the questionnaire pre-testing or pilot study to determine whether respondents have any difficulty understanding the questionnaire and whether there are any ambiguous or biased questions. By doing the pilot study, the uh, by pre-testing the questionnaire or doing the pilot study, errors can be rectified. If there is any error, you can make correction. And unwanted questions can be deleted. There are some questions that are not appropriate and can be deleted. Unclear language and wording can be corrected and improved. Characteristics of a good questionnaire, there must be covering letter. You should have covering letter. Okay. Attractive appearance, layout and size. Anonymity of respondents. You must state that the information is confidential and remains secret. Objective-based. Objective must be stated clearly, appropriate wording, logical sequencing. Brevity means simple. The items or the statements must be simple and brief. Practicability, validity, and reliability. So during the pre-testing, the researchers can test whether the items are valid and reliable or not using certain criteria. So this is the logical flow of the questionnaire. First, you start with introduction, simple related questions, main body, classification details, and then thank you and close. So it's not every question that deserves an answer. Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. So any question, Ahmad, before
No,
we?
alhamdulillah. It's very simple.
So I sent to your WhatsApp
Yeah, yes.
the
I already
textbook
see. Yeah,
and also this PowerPoint.
yes.
And inshallah, next class you try to present your
Yeah,
chapter
yeah.
one.
Inshallah,
Yeah.
next week.
You can send in words.
And what? Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And then
Inshallah today, inshallah.
for presentation, you can make PowerPoint like this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Inshallah, today I will send to you the Word chapter 1 and the PowerPoint. Maybe after 2 days, I send to you also. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Inshallah, we will arrange the time for you to present, inshallah.
yeah, yeah, yes, sir.
Okay. Wallahu ta'ala
Allah.
a'lam.
Assalamu
Assalamualaikum
alaikum.
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.